Just a couple of introductory comments. The Convention and Visitors Bureau, people say, well, what is the Convention and Visitors Bureau? Well, it's not a city agency or a state agency. We're actually a non-for-profit trade association.
Okay, and you're going to use that one too.
Just use that one? Okay, great. So we're like, I would say, a chamber of commerce, except the difference is that the primary members of a Convention and Visitors Bureau are companies in the hospitality industry. So our board of directors is very heavily oriented towards hotels and restaurants and attractions that primarily make in a couple of airlines that make up our board of directors. And around the country, every major destination has a Convention and Visitors Bureau. In New York, it's called NYC and Company. In LA, it's called LA Visit. They used to all be called CVBs, and they've all been sort of changing their names and adding the word visit or something to that effect to kind of drive, because most people, unless you deal with the Convention and Visitors Bureau, wouldn't really know what this entity is all about. But they're, irrespective of what we all call ourselves, the goal really is to drive business to your member companies. And you do that in many different ways: sales, marketing, promotion, special events, etc. But by better servicing meetings and groups when they're in your destination. And that's pretty much what CVBs do. So I've been actually at the CVB since late 1991. And we're about a $15 million company. We have about 60 people. We run 2 visitor centers, actually one on the Common and one back at the Prue. And our offices are located in Copley Place. If anybody needs more information about us, our website is www.bostonusa. It's all one word, bostonusa.com. We also do lots of publications, sort of old school. All of this is available on our site, but we do some general publications like visitor guides. So if you have friends and family members or colleagues that are new to the company, new to the area, we have a visitor guide. We do twice a year a planner that kind of tells you what's going on for the 6 months coming up. And then we do some very specific guides, like this one is Campus Visit, because one of the big industries in Boston and Cambridge, and actually in Massachusetts, are our colleges and universities. So this is just sort of some of the things that we do. I have 2 handouts. They got this? They got these? Okay. The first one I'm going to go through, and it's about 15 slides. And then there's another one that kind of gives you an overview. This was Pinnacle Advisory Group, is a company here in Boston that we partner with to do lots of analytical reports and studies of our industry and the pace. We're always comparing ourselves against what we did and what we are on schedule to do. So we work closely with Pinnacle, and these are some slides in this handout about what it is that we've been doing, where we've been, and hopefully where we'll be going. So with that, the perfect storm. I chose this phrase because I have to admit it wasn't mine, but I heard somebody describing what was going on in the broader visitor industry, and I said, well, that really captures it. It's like if all things went wrong at the same time. So unfortunately, it has been the perfect storm for our industry. And it actually started in the 4th quarter of 2008, and prior to October of 2008, we were on pace in 2008 to have another banner year. And in the Pinnacle slides, you'll see how Boston's occupancy pretty much has been going up. Of course, my wife cautions me that if you take credit for the rise, you're responsible for the fall. So I should have listened to her. But in any case, we had been on pace to have a great 2008, and then something happened in October that we kind of, looking back now, we know what happened, but in October, the phones stopped ringing, people stopped coming, the hotels, meetings, and convention business kind of dropped off, and some meetings actually got canceled, most of them in the financial services area. And since then, since starting in October of 2008, every month through March of 2009, we've actually trailed the previous year. So that's very unlike what we have been experiencing, for 3 or 4 or 5 years, because every month pretty much we were doing better than the year before. And a segment that was hit the hardest is our corporate meetings and events. And there are lots of reasons for that. I basically like to say that if the CFO couldn't get the sales department to forecast what sales were going to be, he or she could certainly get the various departments to forecast what expenses were, and the message that came out from the CFO, if not the chairman, was basically, you're not traveling. Cancel that meeting, cancel that trip to Boston, get on the phone and talk to these people, but travel, literally corporate travel, ground to a halt. And then something happened out in California where AIG, which was one of the recipients of that top money, and I really believe this, they had a legitimate reason to have this meeting. They did have it at a 5-star resort, and it made the news, and my God, I never saw anything just like it went from the Wall Street Journal to the New York Times to every local newspaper to every radio report to every major television report. And those poor people were like kicked from one coast to another. It was like a piñata. Everybody took a shot at them, including some of our elected officials from Massachusetts in D.C., and it just spiraled out of control at that point. And every other financial services firm, many of which did take top money, and then other businesses, none of which was taking top money, all decided that they better cancel their meetings. And, it just was like a firestorm. Northern Trust, that was sponsoring a golf tournament in California, the argument is they were kind of like forced to take the money, so they say, but it was probably one of the strongest institutions, financial institutions, in America. They did a golf tournament. They got, their heads beaten in. Wells Fargo, Bank of America, on and on and on. And this AIG effect that people in our industry refer to is the fact that they held this meeting for what they thought were legitimate purposes, and they ended up, becoming the poster child for irresponsible action. I mean, I'm a taxpayer. I run a private company. I understand, how you're the steward of the dollars, and you have to make sure you do a decent job, and you are reflecting on why you're spending X, Y, on X, Y, or Z. But this thing just was out of control. And so corporate meetings and events just ground to a halt. And I like to say that when you go back and look at some of the charts from Pinnacle, you see how occupancy and average rate and RevPAR went up year after year after year. What was driving that was our corporate activity in business here in Boston and Cambridge. And unlike a city like Houston that years ago was dependent on one industry, energy, natural resources, et cetera. When that went into the tank, the entire economy of Houston tanked, as did its visitor industry and meetings industry. And we've been pretty diversified here in the Boston-Cambridge area in terms of the industries that we have, and it had built in some insulation. And over the last 3 years, that is 6, 7, and first 6 months of '08, we were pretty much just trailing New York City in terms of occupancy, rate, and RevPAR. RevPAR is an industry term. We use revenue per available room, which takes into account the different sizes of hotels. It's sort of a universal standard to measure performance. Those road warriors that propelled our visitor industry along for years, they're now chained to their desks, partly because of the AIG effect, partly because of lack of being able to forecast sales, partly because companies it's paralysis in a sense, but they're chained to their desks. And the ones that aren't chained to their desks, the desks are out in the street, unfortunately, along with them, because we've seen how dramatic the drop-off in employment has been. And all of that then comes back to impact the performance in the Boston and Cambridge hospitality market. And you look at what happened at Logan Airport for that same period of time, November through March. Passenger traffic was down 10.3%. The Acela, which primarily serves the business market of Boston and New York, and to some degree New York on to Washington if you're a Boston originating passenger, but primarily Boston, New York originating passengers, they're down 11.4%. So again, those business travelers chained to their desks. A large trade show, and this is data through, again, March. These major conventions, trade shows traditionally use the new convention center down here on the waterfront, the BCEC, and they're down about 10% on average. We're doing a little better than the nation as a whole. That's down around 12 to 15%. But what we definitely are seeing fewer exhibitors, partly because it's the same argument. Well, you know, why do we need to send 3 people to Boston to man the exhibit booth? People aren't traveling, so we will not have as many people stopping by our booth. I mean, we're kind of self-fulfilling prophecies here. But in any case, trade show attendance, you know, definitely has been down. Association attendance, however, tells a little better story. And by associations, these associations tend to be more meeting room breakout intensive. They're not large exhibit halls. They primarily use the Heinz, not necessarily the BCEC. We had 2 groups that met one was the American Bar Association. They had their winter meeting here in February, and they set an attendance record. And then in March, we had a American-Canadian combined medical meeting, and they had like 3,800 doctors, and they set an attendance record. So the association, and around the country, association business is, for most cities, is down. We're fortunate that our attendance is actually up a little bit. But what I sort of say, so what's the difference here? Why do we have trade shows down and associations up? Trade shows are more business to business. They're focused on sales and marketing promotions. Associations are focused on knowledge and exchange of knowledge. If you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, in particular, you come to your annual meeting to see what the newest advancements are in your area of interest, in your field of expertise. So association business has been holding up. Not to say that, you know, we want to build sort of the whole 09 on just these 2 examples, but we're seeing as we head into May and June, which is very heavy travel for association-related travel business, medical meetings, and for the balance of the year, attendance is up for each one of these medical shows. So that's actually some good news for us. International travel, another segment. We had double-digit growth in 06 and 07, but then in the fall of 08, like, you know, when this tsunami kind of spread across to Europe and hit the UK and Germany, et cetera, we began to see a downturn in our international arrivals. Interestingly enough, I think in one of these slides I have, there's a lot of new air service that's been added at Logan on the international side, so I'll get to that in a moment, but it's sort of like looking forward what's going to happen. On the leisure side, the first quarter of the year, even in a good year, is always our most difficult time. It's hard to sell Boston as a leisure visitor destination in January, February, and March when the snow and the winds are kind of whipping through. It's almost like any Northeast city has that type of a challenge. So this year, though, it was a little bit more of a challenge, and we definitely saw a drop-off in the number of visitors. We saw more staycations. It's a word somebody coined, and you may have heard it every now and then. Primarily, it means people who are doing day trips or staying closer to home. But one of the things that we have found amongst all of these groups is, and travelers, is they're all looking for great deals, and many of them are trading down. And even on the corporate side, if you're staying at 4- and 5-star properties, you are now, probably because your corporate travel department is telling you this, or your CFO is telling you this, they're now looking at more 3+ star or 3-star properties. However, and we do these surveys of both leisure visitors and our convention-related visitors, and it's very interesting that a lot of the data in our industry says it's about price, but it's not always about price. It's still a focus on service. So I guess if you've been staying at 4- and 5-star properties and you were accustomed to 4- and 5-star service in 07, 06, and 07, 08, you still want it in 09. So it's created a little bit of a challenge for hotel companies in terms of how they staff, up to deliver the services that the brand, sort of meeting the brand promise. Brands are great, And people use them because they expect certain level of response and level of service. And then in an economy that we've been experiencing the last 6 months, everybody's looking to try to figure out how they cut some costs. But you do that at your own peril if you end up starting to chip away at the brand promise. Okay, so where are we going? I think that if I had done this slide this morning, what I would say, I would have started with, we need a Boston Marathon every month from now through the end of calendar year '09. The marathon was extraordinary. It was just, you know, people ask me, well, why? Why did, you know, we had 4,000 plus international runners. So why would somebody in an economy that's been as bad as anyone's ever experienced, if you're from the UK or Germany, why did they come to run? Why did they come to Boston? Well, it's because of, again, the brand. It's an iconic brand, the Boston Marathon. If you're, at this time, when you're being very careful about dollars that you're going to spend, or pounds or euros that you're going to spend, clearly the decision must have been, I'm going to do something for myself. And I qualified for Boston. I have a number. I'm going, because you may not get another chance to run Boston. And so, you know, in this era of everybody being very careful about how they spend their dollars, what is probably more fulfilling than spending it on something you've always wanted to do, or that, you know, you feel you have to do. It's kind of one of the 1,000 things you have to do before you move on to the next life. So, but the marathon was extraordinary this past weekend. And, you know, coupled with all the sports activity that was going on in Boston, we got lots of great publicity nationwide, and the coverage for the marathon was pretty remarkable. So, my wish, have a marathon or a marathon-type event every month. What's happening at Logan from starting this month and pretty much through October, if not through the end of the year, we're seeing lots of expanded domestic service. So, you know, you've probably seen articles about Southwest coming to Boston and starting service. And, you know, Southwest may have started out as a airline focused just on leisure travel, but what really has sustained Southwest is business travel. And as people are trading down and they're becoming, in the corporate side, as they're becoming more cost sensitive, Southwest has some really great fares and actually some really great programs for companies. So they have managed to kind of expand their focus and their brand, and serving business travelers as well. And they tend to expand a market. History is, we'll see now, given the conditions in '09, but any market they've gone into, they've been able to expand the market. People just feel, hey, I got to take advantage of these prices. They're too good. So to pass up. JetBlue, believe it or not, is now going to be the largest carrier at Logan Airport. Started out as a discounted carrier. They've added all this new service, and man, I mean, you go into Terminal C, you can just see all the construction activity that's going on there and the expansion of JetBlue. Virgin America, which is part of the this unique kind of entity that was created by Richard Branson and Virgin, but isn't, because of federal law, can't be owned by a foreign company. So it's kind of split between U.S. ownership and Branson's ownership. But again, the brand promise is pretty much what Virgin offers. And they just started service here in Boston last month, and they're doing like 6 flights a day from the West Coast to Boston. And when you get to L.A. or San Francisco, you can then hub anywhere, you know, up and down the West Coast. So we're seeing this airline expansion. And what does that mean? Well, these airline route development people are very careful about where they put these multi-million-dollar aircraft. It's don't put them into markets where no one's going to get on the aircraft or no one wants to go to. So they know something that we may not know, which is the strength of the Boston market. The other factor is Boston's really the point of New England. It's really New England's airport. You know, maybe Boston's airport or Massachusetts airport, but it really is New England's airport. So there are lots of opportunities there. And international service is growing pretty dramatically, even in these, you know, tough economic times. So we have daily now, starting next month, actually, I should say, starting May, there'll be 6 flights every day leaving Heathrow, 7 flights every day leaving Heathrow Airport for Boston. A combination of 777 aircraft and 767 aircraft, 3 by American, 3 by British, and 1 by Virgin Atlantic. And that's only the nonstop service. There's service via Iceland, there's service on Continental, there's service on Delta over, the New York airports, et cetera. There's lots of service from the UK, and likewise, it's people connecting from other destinations into Heathrow and on to Boston. So that's a market that's growing. There's 2 flights a day from Paris nonstop. There are 2 flights a day from Germany nonstop into Logan. So there's lots of international air service coming into the market. And those flights have been added clearly because the route planners and the people who manage the models at these international carriers know what the pent-up demand for Boston is. So that's some good news about regrowing or restarting our international arrivals. And the only area that we do not have good service from, and it's shown in our statistics when you look at where people are coming from internationally, is Asia. And we at the Bureau have been working with Massport for the last couple of years, and every time we get really close to nailing a carrier that's going to start service, something happens. And so we'd been talking with a Japanese carrier about this nonstop service from Asia to Boston and then on into China and Southeast Asia. And they were going to use this new aircraft that was supposed to come off the production line a year ago called the 787. It's the Boeing's aircraft called the Dreamliner. And it's probably, when it finally flies, it's going through its final tests right now in certification, it'll be the most economical aircraft to operate, the most cost-effective to operate, and it's perfectly sized for a market like Boston, which right now is the most underserved market with that doesn't have nonstop service. So you look at the O&D, how many origin and destination, how many people from Boston, Massachusetts, New England have to go to New York in order to get to Asia, or to Chicago in order to get to Asia. So it's the most underserved market based on that data, reasons why Japanese airlines and maybe now this combined Delta Northwest airline are looking at this particular opportunity. What also drives visitors here are special events. I mentioned the Boston Marathon this year. In May, we have the NCAA Lacrosse Championships down at Gillette. We had it last year, and we bid again. You have to bid for these events, and like we had the Women's Final Four in 2006. We had this past March, we had the NCAA Sweet 16 and Elite 8. These are many. We were bidding on these things about 5-6 years ago, so these things are out 5 or 6 years. But anyway, we have the lacrosse championships at Gillette. Thanks to the Kraft family, really. They did a great job in the presentations with us, and we have it again in 2012. We have the Volvo Ocean Race, which is coming right down here to Fan Pier in the end of April and the first 2 weeks of May. It's a big corporate event, worldwide corporate event. We're the only North American stop. July 4th is traditional, another iconic event like the Harbor Fest, which brings in the July 4th concert on the Esplanade, which brings people in tall ships. Hopefully that'll happen this year in July of '09, and then the Head of the Child. So these are the kinds of events that drive lots of people to Boston. Some of these get pretty much national television, if not worldwide television coverage, and we benefit from these events and spending. So again, while no visitor industry is recession-proof, these special events kind of build in some protection for us. I mentioned this earlier about college visits, and freshman parent weekends drives lots of hotel activity and visitor spending. I mean, it's really, in October, when the freshman parent weekends happen, and it's great amount of business for our destination. I'll never forget what happened in 2004, because the Red Sox were in the World Series, and we were responsible for, we worked very closely with Major League Baseball, so we were responsible for getting the room blocks of the St. Louis Cardinals. And the games at Fenway were right over a freshman parent weekend, and they were right over a major medical convention. So we ended up having to use the Quincy Marriott for the team because their requirement was they had about 150 people. Now, there are only 25 people on the roster, but it's the owners, the ownership group, the marketing partners, the media partners, da-da-da-da, so they all have to be in the same hotel. So we put them in Quincy, and I became very friendly with their manager, Mr. LaRussa, because I had people from his office calling and screaming at me on the phone about, you put us in Quincy, we know this is what Red Auerbach used to do to the teams that played the Celtics, this is a whole psychological thing, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I wish I were that smart, that I would have thought that's how we were going to break the 86-year hex. The reality was, as I tried to explain to them, sir, you told us that these rooms had to be in one place. There was not a hotel in Boston that could take 150, people for a guarantee of 3 nights because they weren't going to walk their customers that have been doing business with them, or the association, the medical association had booked rooms. So, long and short of it is, I have friends of mine who would see this thing because it made a national story, and they were like emailing me, I don't believe you did this, how brilliant was this, da-da-da-da. I wish I had thought of it. So anyways, I said earlier, we have strong medical meetings business. Keep an eye on the clock here. Strong medical meetings business for the balance of the year. We're involved in this national campaign about trying to get the media and our elected officials in D.C. to understand, and in the White House to understand how important the meetings industry is to the overall hotel performance and visitor industry performance. And an example of this, you might have seen this, the Mass Bankers Association, they were planning to go to Bermuda for their meeting. They canceled Bermuda and they stayed here in Boston. So they're going to the Fairmont Copley Plaza. So kind of a beneficiary from Congressman Frank and Senator Kerry's railing about AIG, et cetera. We got a meeting that we normally would not have had. Hotel supply, I put this up because it kind of impacts on, obviously, the demand, the more supply you add into the market. We've been somewhat fortunate in that the new additions in '08 to the market were very high-end properties, the Mandarin Oriental in the Back Bay, and over here on Atlantic Avenue, the Battery Wharf, the Fairmont came in. So they're both properties that are sized about 150 rooms. This year, 2 new hotels will be open, a W Hotel in Park Square, across from the Wang Center, and that next to the Schubert. It's sort of a mixed use. It's 235 rooms and the condos. So that'll be, first time that Boston has a W. I've stayed at a W once and never stayed again because I was clearly the oldest person in the hotel, and I wasn't dressed in black, and I wasn't blonde. So anyway, I stay a lot at Starwood Properties, and I checked out that morning, and he says to me, I'm checking out, did you enjoy your stay, sir? And I said, yes, but I will never be back at a W. And he kind of like is punching in the computer, and he clearly didn't hear what I said. He said, so you'll be back? And I said, no, I will never stay at a W. And now he's like, I really have him shaken. And what, did we do something wrong? I said, no. I said, you don't want me staying at your property. I'm not blonde. I'm not blue-eyed. I don't have a lot of hair. I'm not dressed in black. Today I am, but I'm not dressed in black. And most importantly, I'm about twice the average age. I came back to this hotel last night after a day, this happened in Chicago, after a day of meetings, and I looked around, and the lobby that I left in the morning at 7:30 was like a nightclub. It was amazing. Anybody's ever stayed at a W? I mean, my son loves W's. He's 30 years old, though. And it is the kind of thing I said, and it was so dark, I almost had to feel my way to my hotel. I'm exaggerating just a little bit, but if you stayed at a W, you would know what I mean. It's not, I'm more of a Western guy, I try to explain to them. So I think he finally figured out I was having some fun with him. But anyway, it's going to be great for Boston, the W. And then the Morgan's Hotel, which is a New York-based company. It's the Ames building right there, sort of across from State Street Station on State and Congress. And it's a small-sized hotel, but it's another one of those hip hotels. We have to be even younger than the people that stay at the W. So, but it's overall, the fact that we have these brands still coming into Boston tells you something about the overall strength of the market. So I'm going to just make a couple of quick comments and then end on, I have this slide, actually handout, I mean, on this Pinnacle Advisory Group, which talks about the good news. So, you know, it is a limited supply. I mentioned our industries are diverse. We do have popular historical attractions. I mean, nobody, unlike a business, no one is going to pick up the Old North Church or Paul Revere's house and relocate it to Orlando. I mean, the Disney people have tried with their little, you know, when you walk through their America section of their park, but clearly nobody is going to relocate the Old North Church and many of the entities on the Freedom Trail. So it's part of our brand, and it does give us somewhat of a competitive advantage. And, you know, the other point that I would make is that in this era of sort of the kind of experiencing for the first time the dislocation in our industry, the marketing and sales activities, we've actually expanded those activities at the Bureau because, you know, this is cyclical, and when it bounces back, we want to be top of mind with, you know, clients and customers.
Right.
Okay?
Right.